Welcome to Everything EOS. I'm Zach Gall, an ICO data analyst at ICO Alert, the trusted ICO discovery platform. Visit ICOalert.com, the most complete calendar of all active and upcoming ICOs to discover the latest projects and opportunities like EOS IO. And I'm here today in studio, on video, with the founder of ICO Alert and now the CEO of Cypherglass, Rob Finch.
How you all doing? Thank you all so much for joining us for another episode of Everything EOS. If you're joining us on YouTube, this is actually the first podcast where we've added video. I know a lot of you who are now looking at our beautiful faces have been asking us, hey, please do a video version, please do a video version. So if you're listening on iTunes or Spotify or Google Play and you're hearing this, maybe you want to check out the video version, go search Everything EOS on YouTube and check it out. Before we get started, I do need to let everybody know that if you did enjoy the show, please let us know by liking, subscribing, or following the podcast on YouTube, iTunes, or SoundCloud. It lets us know that we're doing a good job. It lets us know which episodes you like better than others, so please keep leaving that feedback.
On today's episode, we're going to be talking about some of the latest news and announcements around EOS IO. This includes updates on the EOS Alliance, some unexpected RAM consumption, Greylisting, block producer news, CPU news, and some Dan Larimer gossip about a universal basic income.
Yeah, and before we get started, I do need to mention that this is not a sponsored podcast. We're just two excited members of the EOS community who, as a matter of disclosure, do hold EOS tokens ourselves. And as a final note, please do not take this podcast as legal, financial, tax, professional, or any other kind of advice. Just two people passionate about this open source software, and always do your own research before making any financial decisions.
All right, so the big news today for you and for the EOS community is Cypherglass back in the top 21.
Thankfully, yeah, we got a big vote from somebody, a big whale last night. 10 million EOS voted our way, bumped us up from 25 back to 17, and it's been a good ride. As you know, a couple weeks ago, I think we were number 41, 42.
40 something, man.
Yeah.
It wasn't good for a little bit.
After fixing the BIFNX vote issue, which we talked about on the last podcast, we jumped up to 25, and now getting one of these votes back, we're back to 17. So we'll keep doing what we're doing. Apparently, we're doing something right. So we appreciate all the votes.
Congrats.
Everybody out there. Thank you.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of issues with the software. A couple bugs came up recently, but it seems like a lot of things have already been patched.
Yeah.
So last week there was, and leading into this week, there is the unexpected RAM consumption. You want to tell everyone about that a little bit?
So unexpected RAM consumption basically allowed somebody who's acting maliciously on the network to essentially insert data into your account in some capacity. But basically what this means is they were using up some of your RAM that you owned, that you purchased for your own needs. Dan came out, he wrote a blog post on it and sort of explained why it was happening and how to resolve it and how to prevent it from happening. So ultimately it's something I don't think anybody really needs to worry about now that it's fully resolved. But one of the things I always like to mention when stuff like this happens is that if there was, I know Ethereum doesn't have RAM, but if there was a little bug like this in Ethereum or Neo or any of these other platforms, it would require a hard fork of the entire platform to fix. But on EOS, these bugs are patched in hours, and most people don't even know that there are bugs because they're fixed so quickly. So it's pretty amazing.
So I think to add to your explanation, for those who don't understand how the resources work within EOS IO, not everyone's a developer, not everyone's using all of the resources. So let's say one token is equal to 1/1,000,000th of the resources on the network. Because not all billion tokens are currently being used for RAM and consumption, you're able to kind of use over your initial allotment.
Right.
And
yeah, it's basically the ability for developers to surge their token allotment. So if I have 1% of all the tokens, I'm guaranteed 1% of the CPU bandwidth and eventually storage on the network. But in the case that my DApp gets super popular, or I need to send more transactions, I can actually surge up to a much, much higher percentage. I think it's almost half of the network that you can take up, assuming nobody else is using their allocation.
I really wish I remembered who wrote this blog post so I can credit them, but they used a really good example of, imagine a cafeteria that serves food, and it every day it makes enough food for 1 billion people to eat food in the cafeteria. But if only 100 million people show up to eat in the cafeteria, then people would be allowed up for seconds to consume the other 900 million tokens worth of food in the cafeteria.
Right.
So what was happening was malicious actors were basically abusing this policy, and they're themselves using up all of that. In this situation, it would be 90% additional consumption so that nobody else could go up for seconds.
Right. And this brought up an interesting sort of mechanism on EOS, which is called greylisting. So greylisting basically allows block producers, in the event that somebody is trying to harm the network or spamming the network, it allows the block producers to sort of temporarily remove a certain account's ability to surge above their dedicated allotment of bandwidth. So it's not you're never going to, when you get graylisted, you're never going to be given less resources than you already own and are guaranteed on the network. You're simply not allowed to surge for a period of time if you're seen to be abusing it. So the account in question that we saw recently was Block.Twitter, which, as we know, has been
Weren't
sending...
they saying, like, I love BM or...
We love BM,
Yeah, like
go EOS. I mean, very positive things. And I think whoever's behind that account is likely just testing the EOS network. You know, to their defense, they did bring a bunch of positive headlines for EOS when we broke all of these transaction records. Now at almost 4,000 transactions per second is the max they've hit so far. So I don't think that person is necessarily a bad actor, but I know some block producers have graylisted that account, but it really takes all of the top 21 to prevent them from surging.
I think it's important, too, when talking about graylisting, to explain the difference between censorship and what graylisting actually is.
Yeah.
So this is not censorship. Censorship would be if you took this account, this block Twitter account, and just completely took away all their rights to the network. They couldn't transact at all. That would be blacklisting them, like excluding them from the network. That's not what's happening. Going back to the cafeteria example, and I really, could you look this up while I'm talking?
Yeah.
I really want to credit who wrote this, but using the cafeteria example, it would be like Block Twitter would be allowed to eat their percentage allotment of the cafeteria food, but they are banned from coming up for seconds.
Yeah, it looks like Greymass is the one that came out with a blog post with the cafeteria analogy. So consistently one of our favorite block producers, Greymass, with their good wallet. So not surprised to see it's them.
So like you said, though, the great thing is that all of these problems are being solved in very short time.
Oh, almost in real time. I mean, going back to any problem on Bitcoin, I remember I got into Bitcoin in 2013, and for the first 4 years of knowing about Bitcoin, they were debating the scaling issue. That one issue just totally crippled any kind of potential governance on the network, since there is no built-in governance. But on EOS, it's like every week more features are added, more bugs are fixed. It's pretty amazing to see.
Even before the bug was fixed, a website, CPUemergency.com.
Yeah.
So they created a service that basically stakes a tiny amount of delegated CPU to any account once every 3 days. You're allowed to use this, so that you could use it to transfer your tokens if you run out of CPU yourself.
Yeah,
and that's an awesome service.
Oh, definitely. And this has happened to some people where, you know, they go in to unstake their tokens and not understanding how the software works, which is totally understandable. They put in, you know, they unstake 100% of their EOS, and then the network says, oh, you don't have any staked CPU or bandwidth, so you can't transact. You're sort of locked. But CPU Emergency lets people get out. I know other people have built this tool into their wallets, but it's awesome to now see a standalone service that's out there, you know, fixing this real issue for people.
So I saw it in the some of the Telegram channels. People would just come in crying, saying, someone please delegate me some CPU. My tokens are stuck.
Right.
And I think something that almost everyone who was using Ethereum before EOS or still uses Ethereum can relate. If you own Ethereum tokens, if you have ERC20 tokens, but you don't have any ETH in your wallet, you're kind of screwed. Your tokens are all stuck. But in that situation, since you can't stake each other bandwidth and delegate them, you actually have to go buy ETH somewhere, which is a process in itself, because we know the friction of buying anything, unless you want to, I guess if you want to pay the 5, 6, 7, whatever the fee is for using a debit card, there's no instant way to get ETH. You have to like rely on someone like donating it to you, essentially.
And I think it's worth highlighting why a tool like delegating bandwidth and CPU to people is built in and exists within the core EOS.io code. And the main reason why is, you know, in the future, obviously you'll be able to lease that token power to people and maybe, you know, get a little interest off of your EOS if you're not using those resources, lease them out to a developer for cheap, or even, you know, if you really support Everpedia and you want them to have more CPU and bandwidth, you could delegate some of your EOS tokens, your EOS token power, while still maintaining control of your EOS. You can sort of do that community good and help them, you know, continue to run their network and continue to scale, which I think is a great feature built in that will only help to, you know, strengthen the community and power these dApps.
I mean, resources are just such a big part of this network, and how they're allocated, how they're delegated, and it's all coming to fruition slowly but surely. And it's really cool to see all the different proposals that have come out. I mean, even if you don't agree with some of these proposals that are coming out, you just got to be happy that people are putting the thought into it to even propose a change.
Oh, I mean, even the fact that the community is so open to change and open to improvement, where so many other crypto communities, Bitcoin, you know, is the most notable example, are just not willing to change, not open to change. They're sort of against it in any way, shape, or form. So it's awesome that the EOS community sees EOS as something that is going to continue to evolve over time.
And I guess that kind of brings me to our next topic. So I took part in the EOS Alliance weekly conference call this past Monday, which is really cool. And for those watching or listening who aren't familiar, the EOS Alliance launched what's called a 12-week referendum series. And what it is every Monday and every Tuesday, there's a conference call, and it's global. Anyone's invited, you just got to sign up. And Monday is a mix of Mandarin, Chinese, and English-speaking people. And then on Tuesdays, it's Korean-speaking people and English-speaking people. And basically what happens was, I could tell you what happened on Monday's call, was Thomas Cox led the call. There's about 49 of us on it.
Wow.
And then half the people spoke Mandarin, half the people spoke English. So everyone broke up into their own groups based on mostly on their own language. But every Mandarin group had someone who also spoke English. And then all of the English-speaking groups had someone who spoke Mandarin. That way, when everyone broke into groups, and we discussed 2 questions. What should the EOS Constitution do, and what are your concerns with the Constitution? They're really simple questions, but it was nice to get it out verbally and kind of put thought into it and kind of hear what other people have to say, because other people's opinions might be different than your own.
Absolutely.
And that's the whole point of this, is to facilitate this discussion. It's really important. And then after everyone came back from their working groups, there's a group facilitator in each group, and they came back and gave a summary of what they discussed. And it was super cool. It was the first one, so there's a little bit of growing pains. I'm sure they're going to continue to get better. But as the program moves forward, there's going to be more in-depth topics, and each working group is going to focus on a specific piece of the Constitution.
Interesting.
And by the end of this 12-week program, there might be dozens and dozens of proposals to the new Constitution, and not all of them are going to get voted in, but all of them are going to be very well thought out. People are going to discuss the pros and cons, and then they're going to go to referendum, which, as far as I understand, referendum's almost ready.
I think so. I mean, based on the podcast conversation that you had with the guys from EOS New York and EOS Canada, which is a great episode. If you didn't listen to it, go take a look on the channel. It's definitely worthwhile and sort of shows the arguments, for and against worker proposal fund. But part of what they talked about also was building out that referendum tool and when that will be ready. And I think they're close to being ready. I'm not sure that the current status of it, but I do know that they're making good progress, and it should be. I think we're coming up on the date here.
I talked to Josh Kaufman from EOS Canada. What's up, Josh? This morning to ask him kind of an update on this, because he's really integrated in the working groups. He's working on the WPS and the referendum, so he's a really good resource to speak to. And he said that they're working out some testing for it, and basically it's almost done and ready to be implemented.
That's awesome.
And I asked him, is there any reason that the block producers won't approve it? He said no. Do you have any reason that the block producers won't approve referendum?
I don't think so. No, I think referendum is something that everybody has been waiting for. And if you're watching or listening and you're going, what is referendum? What is it? It's basically a mechanism. It's software that allows EOS token holders to kind of vote on which constitutional amendments they want to be included. Ultimately, it's up to then the block producers to listen to the voters and implement those amendments that everybody votes for. But I think you would be crazy as a block producer to go against what the community wants, because you're going to get voted out. I mean, there's no easy way around that. So I think it's going to be interesting to see, though, the arguments on both sides, which amendments are just approved by the majority, which are maybe, more contentious. But I'm curious to see what people come up with.
I think the most interesting part is the accountability layer that it adds to who everyone wants to vote in as the block producers. Because if the whole community, let's say 70% of the community supported some sort of amendment, but one of the top 21 block producers voted against it for some reason, like, they better have a damn good explanation of this, or they're not going to stay in their position very long.
Absolutely. And I think this all goes back to the block producers really being representatives of the community, of the people who are voting them in. So I think a lot of that is going to be tested, and hopefully all the block producers just listen to what their constituents want and implement that. But I don't know, it'll be interesting. Maybe there will be something that a block producer's gung-ho about, approving or disapproving that goes against the community.
So I guess there's been some other updates. Mobile scatter wallet is almost ready, it seems like. NS James, he posted a screenshot recently of him using, he's the one who's developing the scatter wallet. He shared a screenshot of him playing EOS Dice on his mobile phone.
Yeah. Which
was pretty cool. I think he said he doesn't have the front end UI built yet.
Right.
But it's really cool to know that we're going to have a mobile wallet soon. But we also like to speculate that Block.One's working on their mobile wallet as well.
And I think before we dive into that and talk a little bit about, I think we both sort of have an idea of what might be included in that wallet and how they're going to prevent people from abusing the free accounts. But I think just focusing on why mobile and why mobile wallets are so crucial is a point that's worth bringing up. And I think the main reason comes with mass adoption. So if I can go to somebody and say, oh, you want to get interested in EOS, hey, download this wallet, set up your free account. Now you can play all of these games and use all of these apps right on your phone, versus the current situation, which is, hey, make sure you have Chrome installed, make sure you get this browser, and then set up an account through this other separate service, then go to this website to play this dApp or play this game or use one of these dApps that's built on EOS. It's a very, I don't want to say convoluted process, but it's a very complicated process, especially if you're new. So by sort of bringing all of that to mobile and making it a one-stop shop where you can just log in, set up your account, and then instantly begin using all of these dApps on EOS is going to change the game for mass adoption, where before, very high barrier to entry. Now, after mobile is approved, very low barrier to entry to bring people into the ecosystem. And I think that is going to have a massive rippling effect throughout the community and throughout the dApps when we see these user adoption numbers come out.
So do we want to get into the digital identity?
Let's do it. So this is all speculation sort of centered around what Block.One may or may not announce at the upcoming EOS London Hackathon, September 22nd and September 23rd. Both Dan and Brendan, I think, have teased, hey, we have announcements coming, but nobody really knows what they are. But we think we know what they are.
So let's start this off just mentioning what's happening at the end of this month of September.
Yeah.
So London is where it's at, and Rob, you're going to be there, right?
I will be there. I'm also speaking at one of SVK's Cryptos events on the 19th, I believe, in London.
I saw that. Shane just pinned it to their Telegram channel.
Yeah.
I saw your name on there.
Yeah, so if you all are in London, you want to come see me speak, it's the 19th. You can check out the info on the SVK Crypto channel, but I'll also be at the EOS Hackathon the 22nd and 23rd.
And then after the EOS Hackathon, both Dan Larimer and Brendan Bloom are going to be at an event called Blockchain Live, and that's on September 26th. So pretty much, what are your dates you're going to be there for? You're going to...
I think I'm going to fly in on the 18th, and then I may or may not stay for Blockchain Live. It kind of depends. But I'll definitely be there at least through the 25th, to sort of see, or 24th, I guess, to see the end of the hackathon, see the awards ceremony, and go through that whole process. But I'm excited to meet so many people who I already know are going to be there, and I think it's going to be an awesome time in London.
You're going to be shaking hands and kissing babies.
Is that the expression, shaking hands and kissing babies?
I mean, being a block producer, you're basically a politician. You're constantly trying to represent the community and trying to make decisions based on their will, and you're constantly up for vote. Yeah, it's always election day.
I kind of view politician as a pejorative. I think it has a negative connotation, but I definitely agree. I mean, we are politicians to some extent within the EOS
politics
community.
is kind of has a negative connotation, but
Definitely.
they are a representation of the people.
Oh, absolutely.
I feel like that's kind of where it more relates.
No, definitely.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff going on in London, and if anyone's listening, you know about all the teases. Dan has been on fire in Telegram lately with all these new proposals, and when people ask when, I don't know if he's actually said London or if he's just made like a little emoji of a winky face.
No, he said London. He has explicitly said, there was a screenshot that I took and actually tweeted out of Dan responding to someone who said, when can we see more announcements and believe in you again? And he said London.
Nice.
So London EOS Hackathon, it's going to be a good one.
So one of the things we think they're going to release, and whether they release the actual product or just make it official that they're working on and give us a timeline on it, one of them is what we've been talking about here, the mobile wallet. And with the mobile wallet, we believe, because I mean, Dan's just a huge fan of Apple and everything iPhone, iMac, everything. They have what's called a secure enclave and some biometric ID functionality. You want to explain that?
Yeah, so every iPhone, if you have an iPhone that was made anytime between now and 2013, inside your actual iPhone is what's called a secure enclave chip. So basically what this is it's almost like a standalone computer that exists in your iPhone right now that stores your Face ID or Touch ID data. So right now when you put your fingerprint in or you put your face in, if you have an iPhone 10, all of that data, that fingerprint data, that Face ID, all that biometric data is stored on that offline separate computer, separate chip within your phone. So what Block.One is actually doing is utilizing that secure enclave to store your private keys. So that will mean that in the same way that you can store your keys offline on a Ledger or a Trezor, which is this separate hardware wallet, you can effectively have a Ledger or a Trezor built in to your iPhone that you can just access using your face or your fingerprint. So that's sort of where the excitement comes of telling your friend, hey, download this new app. You can set up an account for free through Block.One's free account program, and you're going to sign transactions with your face or your fingerprint, which is just such a cool futuristic version of EOS.
So you just mentioned something, the free account. So right now, prior to any of these speculative announcements we think are going to happen,
Yeah.
there's a fee involved with creating an EOS account.
Yeah.
If you weren't part of the Genesis snapshot, what do you think the dollar value is at today's price? Like
I think it's actually less than $1. I think it's point. Actually, no. Right now, it's about 0.4 EOS to make an account. But with a future update that Dan is coming out with, it should reduce the cost of creating an account by another 75%, and will then be about 0.1 EOS, which will be about 60 cents.
It's not a lot, but it's more than what people are used to. You can't just spin up a new wallet.
Right.
But what Dan has already he's confirmed this, is that Block.One has a program that they're going, or dApp or something that you're going to sign up for, and it's going to give you a free EOS account if you don't already have one.
Yep.
But with the caveat of there's probably going to be some sort of decentralized identity verification on it. And we believe it's going to be through the iPhone Secure Enclave.
Yeah, or the MacBook Pros that have been out in the last 2-3 years all have the fingerprint reader.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be another way. If you want the desktop version, you get it on your Mac, you load it up. But I think, going back to one of the previous conversations we had about why we think it's going to be the Secure Enclave and why they're going to have an identity system, is if Block.One is out there paying that 60 cents or that few dollars for every person that signs up, in order to prevent abuse and prevent a bot from coming in and registering 1 million accounts for free and draining all of that money from Block.One, they really need a way to uniquely identify individuals. And what's more unique than your fingerprint or your Face ID? I don't think it gets any more unique than that, unless you're going to take a blood sample and do a DNA test.
And if identity could be solved, then it opens up the door to something Dan has written extensively about, especially around 2016. He's written about something called universal basic income. Now, if you've been following the show or just the Telegram channels, you kind of understand where I'm coming from here. About 2 weeks ago, we had an episode where we talked about the worker proposal system that was initially planned for EOS. And what that was it was a 4% inflation on the total supply of tokens would be used every year to fund proposed projects. And we can get into some of them, but some of them were like for security, code review, some arbitration stuff. It would all fund that, and it would be based on token holders voting to what projects that they wanted to fund. But the issue that Dan had with that was he didn't trust it from not being abused by whale manipulators. So what that means is if you have a lot of tokens, you could basically pick and choose which projects you want to get voted in, because not 100% of the billion tokens are actually going to vote.
Right.
So the smaller and percentage and less people who are actually voting, the more risk there is for a whale or a group of whales, a cartel of whales, to manipulate the market and kind of allow the rich to get richer. So Dan has proposed removing the WPS from the system contract, which it's not really even being used yet anyway. And he, over the last week, has been going crazy about proposing what is the universal basic income. Now, I don't think that this is something, I don't think he could implement it anytime soon.
Right.
But
I think...
Want to kind of explain what it means and with the digital identity, how it fits in? So
Dan is not the first person to ever write about or come up with universal basic income, but it's kind of been looked at as this solution in the future. Let's say that 75% of people can't get a job because they've been replaced by a robot. Basically, they've been replaced by massive increases in automation, which we're seeing now. If your only skill set is to be a cashier at McDonald's, and they replace you with a little kiosk that people can go up and order on a touchscreen, you're obviously out of a job. And if you don't have skills to get more value in the economy, you aren't going to have any money. And then what happens? Are you just going to let 75% of the world die? So universal basic income will basically be the minimum amount of money that people need to sort of live, to sustain their life, and you would give it to everybody in the world. I have some moral problems with it. I'm not 100% in favor of it, but that's basically the concept.
With EOS, though, I mean, it wouldn't be able to sustain any source of living. Universal basic income, if it were implemented on EOS, and the way Dan proposed it was, someone on Telegram asked him if he was proposing redistributing the 4% inflation that was originally meant for the WPS. They asked if he was proposing that they redistribute it to all token holders, and he answered that with 2 unique individuals.
Which I think this is interesting, because I think the solution to the worker proposal fund that Dan is concerned about, this whale manipulation, is staring him right in the face. If they do release this identity system, we can have a different voting structure where you can only vote for the worker proposal fund fund proposals. Like if you can only vote on which projects are going to be funded through that system if you have that unique ID associated with your account, and then each person would get one vote. I think that alone would solve his concerns with the worker proposal fund, that where I don't think you need to then just redistribute inflation to token holders. I'd rather, if there's going to be some kind of redistribution, I'd rather they just burn the extra inflation rather than constantly devaluing people's EOS every year.
So, I mean, I don't think I'm ready to say that I would be on board with a UBI initially.
Right.
I think this is a very, very long-term plan, and it would depend on a lot of things happening that kind of people hypothesize around, like the global financial collapse and the multi-trillion-dollar market cap of crypto. Like all that stuff would have to happen first, I think.
Right.
But it is an interesting idea, and it's not something that hasn't been proposed in real life off of the blockchain. In doing a little bit of research for this episode, I saw that Alaska actually had a universal basic income for a period of time.
Wow.
And then there's also in Canada, they've tested it in like individual cities over different periods of time. And actually the whole country of Switzerland in 2016 actually put it up for a vote on referendum. And they voted it down by 70% of the people in Switzerland voted down a universal basic income.
I mean, I have some, not to get too deep in like a debate. I know we had kind of talked about doing a little bit of a UBI debate, but I don't know. I have problems with just handing people money for free. I think like the biggest example that I look at in the past is the welfare system. Obviously, there are people on the welfare system utilizing that as that sort of, safety net fallback that aren't abusing the system and aren't just draining it for its resources to, live and not work. But I think there is a significant amount of bad actors in the welfare system, just collecting free money, having more children to get more money, that are abusing that system, where I don't know that a UBI or giving people free money is necessarily the right solution for when these future problems arise.
I mean, that's like the most common argument you hear against. And just from reading it, I can't argue against it because I'm not familiar enough with the topic. But basically, you have in life, you have three options of how you could live your life. You could work for someone else, you could work for yourself, or you can die, or you could do nothing. Sorry, you can't die. You
I mean,
might die.
Doing nothing is kind of the equivalent of dying, though, to some extent.
And for a lot of people who don't have money, your only option is number one, to work for someone else. There's never, ever going to be an opportunity to work for yourself. And in this future decentralized economy, that sounds like it's where everyone's headed is. Everyone kind of, like, we see it today with the gig economy.
Yeah.
Look at Uber. Right. You could literally rent out part of your house in an Airbnb and drive an Uber, work for yourself because of they're not decentralized systems. They're centralized systems with a decentralized employee force.
Well, even I was talking with somebody named Aaron Schneider who reached out over email to me about crypto tax questions. He's a CPA and kind of looking to get in that field. And shout out to you, Aaron, if you're watching or listening to this episode. But we were talking a lot about the gig economy and sort of how that will be transformed by all of these different dApps that are building on the blockchain. And I was talking about, I said, in the relatively near future, I believe we'll see people making a living from completely virtual token-based worlds. So rather than getting paid for doing freelance design or writing work or driving for Uber, like you said, an individual could choose to be, a human oracle for an EOS prediction market or set up a virtual shop in a virtual world that's on the EOS blockchain. So I think as the amount of traditional jobs where you're working for somebody else decreases, I think we may simultaneously see an increase in these sort of virtual gigs that people can do, where these are jobs that we can't even really comprehend right now. No. We can't sort of come up with them because they're totally new concepts and totally new worlds that haven't been built yet. But I think 5-10 years down the line, we may look at this as a normal thing, like, oh yeah, I sell virtual items. I own that virtual store in that virtual world, and that's how I pay my bills. But I think more of that's going to happen that will hopefully offset the amount of unemployment around the world.
Well, another thing is we talk about this worker proposal system and then arbitration. As this system grows and scales, do you know how many little tiny disputes are going to come up that we're going to need an army of arbitrators to resolve?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's going to need to be an army of arbitrators who are all getting paid in micropayment. You think about it. So as our system scales on EOS, there's going to be thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of cases in arbitration. For the worker proposal fund, there's going to be thousands of proposals. We're going to need a lot of people to sift through this. And I think there will eventually be a reputation system. So let's say I want to be a decentralized arbitrator and I want to take arbitration cases occasionally. over time, I'm going to arbitrate cases and build up a reputation so that whenever someone wants to send money through a smart contract with arbitration, and if they want to pick and choose their arbitrators, they could pick me based on my reputation and see that I've arbitrated hundreds of cases and have a good review.
Right, and I think I'm totally cool with arbitration on that level as long as it's opt-in and I can sort of say, hey, I want this arbitration board to handle my arbitration cases with this contract that I'm doing or with this business deal or whatever the case may be. Similar to how you write a business contract today and you say this contract will be governed under the laws of the state of New York or Pennsylvania or wherever you want to kind of pick that arbitration jurisdiction, and I think it should be very similar, but totally opt-in on EOS eventually.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, it's the difference between if I'm sending one EOS to Rob, I could send it directly to Rob, but let's say Rob promises to do something for that EOS. I have no way of making him fulfill that obligation. So by using an arbitrator, we would use a trusted middleman. And instead of me sending a token directly to Rob, we would write our own smart contract based on what I want in return for that one EOS token. So for that one EOS token, he said he's going to sell me a black cat. So I put my one EOS token into this arbitrator smart contract, and then Rob sends me a white cat, and I say, whoa, I'm going to fight this in arbitration. So then I argue that dispute, and then all the tokens get held up. I don't know what would happen with the cat. I guess I would just keep it for a little bit. But basically, the arbitrator would take both of our arguments and probably charge a fee to the loser and come up with a resolution to that dispute.
Right. It would basically be, and I don't even know if we would need to do a smart contract or not, or just sign something that includes an arbitrator in our payment. I'm not sure 100% sure how it would work.
I think you would just include the hash of the arbitrator in the...
that makes sense.
Yeah, I was reading, Thomas Cox actually recommended an article to me on Monday about governance and kind of what direction we're headed in to make smart contracts applicable by law. And I'll admit it, it's completely over my head. But eventually, it's expected that actually, from like my limited knowledge of this stuff, is that in the future there needs to be like jurisdictions, like countries, who have their own like arbitrators who could be hashed into these smart contracts, that they're the decision makers. Because you think about a blockchain, you can't really enforce certain things that you could enforce in real like criminal or civil law. I'll include the article in the description of anywhere you're listening to this show or watching it. I'll include it so you guys could read it. But it's super interesting and super high level. And of course, Ian Grigg was like the resource of all the references, and he's just a genius. I don't think the article was written by him, but I'll share it in the link notes.
Awesome. Do you want to move past universal basic income to another proposal that came up recently?
Yeah, so this one was interesting because there wasn't like a blog post on it, but there was a 8-minute YouTube video by a group of people or a person called EOS Weekly. And what they proposed was electing code producers who would have a similar role to block producers, but slightly different. You want to kind of...
So their proposal, and then we'll talk about whether we agree or disagree with it or how we might change it, but their proposal is basically to... right now you have 21 block producers that are paid 1% inflation from the network. These are the people like us at Cypherglass who are processing the transactions and doing network upgrades and fixing bugs and basically keeping the network online. This proposal, in addition to the 21 block producers, wants to add 21 code producers, which are also paid and elected in the very same way that block producers are elected, with 1% network inflation, which would be more inflation in the network. And the goal of these code producers would basically be to manage the EOS.io code. So these would be people that are writing updates and improvements to it, people that are maybe setting up watchdogs to make sure that block producers are doing the right thing, people that are doing smart contract auditing, but essentially all centers around the EOS.io code and making sure that it continues to upgrade and evolve and sort of be stable in the same way that block producers are making sure that the network is stable. Their argument is kind of, right now Block.One is the one writing all of these updates or writing most of the updates. They obviously have a bunch of volunteers in their GitHub that are committing as well, but it's sort of looking to the future, I think, where Block.One maybe isn't publishing any EOS.io code anymore, and we need people to step in to do it.
Yeah, I actually looked at that the other day because prior to the mainnet launch, EOS, their GitHub account was the most active one on GitHub for C++, I think, and probably for a lot of other things. But it's like dead now.
I don't know. I would say dead.
It's
I mean, there are still hundreds of commits there every week, and I think if you think about what a commit is on GitHub, I could change one letter in a file and then submit that, and on that map that everybody's looking at, it's going to say, oh, that one's more active because they changed one letter and committed, one letter and committed, one letter and committed. You can make it look like more or less, but I mean, from my perspective as being a part of Cypherglass, the block producer, we continue to see the updates come. When there's a bug like the RAM issue, we continue to see Block.One step in and help us fix it. So
yeah, I'll admit,
I think they're still doing their job.
I'm not looking at the GitHub code daily.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
I unfortunately am not able to work on EOS 24 hours a day like you.
Yeah.
But
I mean, talking about the code producers, it's something that at first I thought that they were talking about, oh, these are 21 people who are going to build dApps and build other software.
It's not people. It would actually be like companies.
Well, companies
so
are in the
like
same way block
producers.
producers,
It's like
yeah.
You are a block producer, but it's not you.
It's not just me. It's me and our whole team. Yeah. But I don't know. Personally, this is a job that I think, one of the main things that we're talking about was GitHub repo management, where you're storing the code, where you're storing updates to the code. It's something that we as block producers are already really doing. I mean, we have a separate repo that we sort of keep up to date. There are other block producers that keep their separate repo, and then there's one main EOS mainnet repo that people continually pull from. But if you go to something like eosnetworkmonitor.io, you'll actually notice that a lot of people are on sort of this main version of the software, and it does the version based on color codes. And then other block producers, it depends, are on slightly different versions. And what that is just them pulling from their own repo versus the community EOS mainnet repo. But I really don't think it's necessary. I don't think there's enough work here to be done where you need 21 groups or 21 individuals to come in and manage code and do these things when block producers are already kind of doing it.
I don't think so either. And I think Kevin Rhodes was talking about this, what you just mentioned. I didn't understand it at the time, but you just re-mentioned it as some people use the main repo and some people house their own repos.
Right.
But no matter how much you trust these auditors, you're always going to still need to have someone in-house as a block producer to audit the code again before you implement it.
Oh, absolutely.
So whether there's 21 code producers or even if Block.One themselves say this code's good to go, every block producer still needs to audit that code themselves before they implement it. So it's doing double the work, I think.
Absolutely. I just don't think, I think we need to be careful as we implement new proposals. I think proposals are great and people should continue to propose them because they start conversations and get people thinking about things from a different perspective that maybe they weren't thinking about before. But we need to be very careful when we're talking about inflation in the network, because inflation ultimately is devaluing everybody's tokens, even through block producers by 1% every year. Fortunately, it's been offset by RAM trading fees, where that 1% hasn't even made more than 1 billion tokens. But I think we need to be careful about adding new methods of inflation, especially when they're not necessarily necessary at this moment. It's just something we need to be very careful about, because we don't want to get to a point where we have 12% inflation because there are 12 different groups of producers that are all doing their own thing, when the block producers can kind of handle a lot of this responsibility.
I think everyone can agree with that. Even with the WPS, I still support it fully, but I don't support it needing 4%. 4% is a lot on top of the 1% of
I totally agree.
I think to get things rolling, I think the WPS could probably work off of like a 1 or 2%, even 1% just to get the emergency items taken care of.
Yeah, I'm in favor of 1%, get the system going, maybe even wait to see what happens in London. If they do announce this ID system, we solve the whale issue by requiring everybody to have that unique ID to vote. And then one ID equals one vote. It becomes a much more democratic process versus just, being controlled by the amount of money or EOS that you hold.
So just to conclude this, you're against the code producers?
In its current form, I'm against the code producers because I think it's a job that we as block producers are already doing, and we really don't need to add that extra 1% inflation when that could be saved for something else like the worker proposal fund.
So are you for or against the WPS?
I am for the WPS at a reduced rate of 1%. And just kind of seeing how it goes, even if there isn't that ID system, which I do think will exist, but even if that isn't implemented, I think it's worth doing a trial run for 6 months or a year at that 1%, seeing, okay, was this manipulated by whales? Did the community come in and sort of, choose which projects? I think it would be, I think, a shame to remove such a potentially innovative part of the EOS network and what makes it so unique without even testing it and seeing if it's going to work. Just saying, oh, there's going to be a problem, let's not even try it. I think we have to try it, and we owe it to the EOS community to try it because it could be so innovative and it could add so much value to the EOS network.
And if it doesn't work, it could always be amended out.
Exactly.
That's the beauty of EOS.
Absolutely.
Its governance model allows it to always be interchangeable at any time. You could change anything as long as the community can agree on it, and that's pretty much what's going to set this apart from everything else is the governance model, and it's never been done before. So it's going to be a long road, but it's going to be exciting, and we're basically looking to change the world. As crazy as that sounds, as crazy as someone like Brock Pierce sounds talking about changing the world. Now that Dan's like talking about UBI and all these big picture things, it's making more and more sense each day. But it's still like a generational gap. Like there's going to be a long time before this stuff happens.
I mean, and if we look at, Block.One's initial commitment where they said, hey, the 100 million tokens that Block.One has, a lot of people think, oh, they just have those 100 million tokens now. But those tokens actually vest over a period of 10 years, which means every year they get 10% of those tokens, or 10 million tokens. So it's going to take 10 years for Block.One to get their 100 million EOS tokens and actually be able to trade them and move them or sell them or lease them to somebody else, whatever they want to do. But as part of that 10 years, Dan has not only said that he personally has a long-term commitment to Block.One, but has said that Block.One has a commitment to publishing updates to the EOS.io software for 10 years. So I think they're also thinking on this sort of decades timeline where, what does the world look like a decade from now? Do we need UBI then? Do we need something else? And it's cool to see people thinking that far ahead.
We talked about this earlier today, is with the inflation built in, let's just use the 5% as an example, as if the 4% will get allocated somehow, and then we have the 1% for the block producers. After 10 years from now, I don't have the math in front of me, but in 10 years, Block.One's going to own much, much less than 10% of the network.
Oh, absolutely.
And if you read into Dan's Telegram conversation, he kind of spells it out. The reason he chose 5% is because all established money would turn over every 100 years. You guys can check the Telegram to make more sense of that. But basically, you could have all the wealth you want right now, but if a 4%, and I'll talk about the 4% UBI, but if 4% of the total EOS tokens were inflated every year and given only to unique individuals and not based on how many tokens you already currently own, over a long period of time, if you're like a whale and you're not reinvesting your money and building more wealth, you're eventually not really going to be wealthy anymore over time.
Right, which I think is
decades.
It's an interesting concept. I do think that 5% total inflation is too high for the long term.
I think so too.
I think something like 2% total, including block producers, including work proposal, maybe like a small amount of inflation for some future concept. I think 2% is a good number because right now with 1%, it's being offset by RAM trading fees and these other EOS.io name fees when you're bidding on premium account names, where now I think there's actually less than 1 billion EOS tokens. We started with 1 billion. Now there's less because there's been more RAM trading than there has been inflation through block producers.
If you read into Dan's like property rights and universal basic income articles he wrote a while ago, when he's explaining how a UBI could actually be possible in the real world, he said specifically it would be paid for with inflation,
right? But
the actual money would not be inflationary. And if you think about it with EOS, what that basically would mean is whatever inflation there is, it's always going to be offset by something else, like the Rex trading fees or the RAM trading fees or whatever other services come out over the next however many years. It's going to be a system that has inflation, but it's not inflationary.
Right.
And that can only happen whenever there's an equilibrium of production and inflation.
Right, which I think is great. I mean, if you think... Also, when we're looking at inflation, if you think about the worker proposal fund, will adding 1% inflation add more than 1% of value to the EOS network?
100%.
I think absolutely. I think even if there was some whale manipulation, I think it would still add more than 1% value. Same with block producers. I mean, we're out there upgrading our infrastructure. We're sort of these, as you said, representatives of the community. We're adding way more than 1% of value back into the EOS network, based on what we're getting paid from the network.
I'll tell you one thing, Rob. This is the 21st episode of our podcast.
Yeah.
The first time on video.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've given probably enough to the community that outweighs the actual tokens I own.
That's fair. I like that.
So I feel like that's my role as a community member.
Yeah.
Is I try to give back to the community. And that's why we keep doing this show.
Yeah.
I mean, my job is not to do a podcast or to edit and produce the podcast, now video. My job's a completely different thing. I do this because I work in the crypto industry and I love EOS.
Yeah.
And I want to grow the community, and that's my role.
I think we need a term for that, like you're personally deflationary. You know, when people say they have like a carbon neutral footprint, you have like an inflation neutral footprint where you're 100%. Not adding anything to the network. I like that. That's great.
All right. So what other topics do we have before we wrap up? I think we ran out of notes.
The last thing I wanted to talk about was something we didn't mention in the resource management section, was that Dan says they have a new WASM interpreter. WASM is WebAssembly. It's sort of one of the languages that you can use to interface with EOS, but they have a new version of that coming soon that will double the CPU and bandwidth per token. So basically what that's saying is, right now, if you have 10 EOS and you have those staked for transactions, you can do a certain number of transactions by keeping those 10 EOS staked. Once this new update comes out that makes it more efficient to process transactions, you'll actually be able to do as many transactions as if you had 20 EOS staked. So you'll be able to do double with the same amount of EOS, which is awesome to see. It reminds me very much of, Tesla's sort of software update model where you buy a car, but then it gets better and better over time. With EOS, you get into this network, it gets better and better over time. You get more claim to these resources as the network continues to grow and expand.
Really, really looking forward to what the future brings. That's what's so cool about this. That's why I love talking about it, because it forces me to stay in tune to the EOS community. It forces me to talk to other people and know what's constantly going on. And through doing that, it opens up my eyes to what the future is going to bring. And it's going to be very, very bright.
Definitely. Yeah, the more, people ask me because of the $1 million EOS bet, do you still think it's possible? Could we hit $1,000 by the end of the year? I think in a certain scenario where a certain number of things happen, I do still think that that's possible. But beyond that, people ask me, are you still bullish on EOS even though, we're at $6 versus the all-time high of 20 or 22? I'm more bullish now than I ever have been, because the more that I interact with the community, the more I see these upgrades to the network go out, the more I see these new proposals and referendum coming together, the more and more excited I get about this, and the more I see EOS sort of, making a bigger gap between them and all of these other blockchains that are behind them now, with EOS having more now daily active users than the dApps on Ethereum. So already in the 3 or so months that EOS has been live, it has surpassed Ethereum, which has been out for 2 or 3 years, in the number of daily active users on dApps, which I think is a major accomplishment, and we're only going to see more and more of that as time goes on.
And as far as transaction volume, if you go to Blocktivity, so the top 3 blockchains based on transactional activity is EOS, Steem, and BitShares. And do you know who built all 3 of those pieces of software?
Yep.
Someone's got some experience with scalable blockchain systems.
Oh, absolutely. And if you look at EOS also, including Steem and BitShares, but if you just take EOS out, EOS actually does more transactions per second, but also more transactions per day. It has the highest transaction volume of all of those other blockchains combined. So you add up Steem, BitShares, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Neo, Ethereum Classic, everything. Add up all of the other cryptos, and EOS is doing more transactions than all of them combined. I think it's at 70%, 69 or 70% of total blockchain transactions, which is pretty nuts. I mean, that,
do you know,
we talk
do you know
about
what's more nuts than that, Rob?
What?
More nuts? That the network's using a fraction of a percent of its total bandwidth capacity. So it's already doing more transactions on a daily basis than the whole top 10 combined minus EOS. And it's doing it at like bare minimum usage of its resources.
Yeah, not even just the top 10 combined, the top 10,000 combined. I mean, every single blockchain, you add them up, EOS is doing more. It's crazy.
Killer.
Yeah.
So you brought it up earlier. How are you feeling about that $1,000 $1 million $1,000 EOS bet?
I still honestly, people still think I'm crazy. I saw a tweet that was like, the easiest way for a smart person to look like a stupid person is to make a short-term price prediction. And I was like, oh yeah, you have a point there. But
you're in good company then, man. Novogratz has made insane, like not bets, but predictions. Right. Come on. Like,
well, I think something that people are shocked by or don't realize is that the bet is denominated in EOS. It's denominated as 1,000 EOS bet, which I've said many times in Telegram and when people ask about
when
it.
The bet was made.
Yeah, so we're both we're both hedged on both sides. We both have that 1,000 EOS, and we'll basically just swap. So if it hits $1,000, he owes me $1 million as that 1,000 EOS. If it hits $500, I owe him $500,000 as that 1,000.
I was just looking. Q's actually not in the office. He's probably getting lunch or something.
Oh, I got
looking to see if he's in here. I was going to call him in.
Yeah, bring him in for the video. But I think it's still. Let's say London happens. They come out with the wallet that has a built-in decentralized exchange. It has a built-in identity system. It's easy to go.
2.0, please.
I think if all of that happened and then a mainstream dApp came out from Block.One or somebody else like a Steem at 2.0 or disrupting Facebook, I think it is possible we could hit that kind of crazy insanity level in the next 4 months. If it doesn't happen, I think it will eventually, just maybe not on the timeline that I predicted. But I think ultimately it's been a fun bet that has gotten people thinking about the future of EOS and the potential of EOS, and I'm excited to see what happens over the next 4 months. It's going to be interesting.
I have a price prediction.
Yeah, do you?
I think leading up to the hackathon, September 22nd and 23rd, I think we're going to see a price bump.
Yeah, a price bump.
Because everyone like
that's it. No specific.
Yeah. So basically, everyone's expecting big news. We've seen this every time. Like I remember the one in South Korea back in January, everyone was expecting some crazy big news, and it was tomorrow BC getting announced, I think.
Yeah, a VC fund associated with Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google.
So my prediction is all the speculators are going to come out of the woodwork the week leading up to the EOS hackathon in London, and then I think the news is going to come out, and I mean, the expectations are so high that there's probably going to be a dump afterwards. It won't be me dumping. I hodl, bro.
I like it.
I've hodled the whole way up and the whole way down.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to see that. That's my price prediction. I usually don't make them, but I know this is the cycle that happens. So the market seems like it's doing a little bit of green. EOS has been doing really well the past couple of days. I think EOS is going to lead the pack for recovery. And if we're talking about timelines, around that same time frame, the delay on the Bitcoin ETFs coming up for the new decision. I think it might be September 20th, actually. But like I said last week, I'm expecting another delay. But, dude, if I see a delay, I'm bullish still.
Oh, absolutely.
Anything but a denial, and I am complete balls out bull.
I think even with a denial, I think there are a lot of people within the crypto community that would be happy to see a denial, happy to see kind of institutions stay away for a little while. But I don't know. I mean, I think we'll see what happens, but there's enough power in just the EOS technology and what it's done and what it's going to continue to do that EOS on its own, Bitcoin ETF, no Bitcoin ETF, I don't think it matters. I think EOS is going to be the blockchain platform of the future.
I'm not relying on the Bitcoin ETF.
Right.
I'm relying on Dan to fulfill this vision, Brendan to fulfill the vision, Brock's vision. Like it's all going to come together.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be instant, but I think we're going to see the groundwork getting laid within the next year, and we're going to have a much, much clearer picture of what to come. And I think what everyone needs to remember is like we work in this space. The people listening to this during this bear market, you guys probably are ingrained in the crypto and blockchain space, so you guys understand. But a lot of people don't understand that if we're at the early adoption phase now, we're at the very, very early portion of this. Andreas, I can't even say his last name. Antonopoulos. He says he actually did a Q&A recently on YouTube, and someone asked him if we are in the early adoption phase, and he said no. And I like the term he refers to it. He says we're still on the lunatic fringe. We're all still just a bunch of lunatics.
Right.
And the lunatic's job is to tell the early adopters how great everything is to get them to become early adopters. And that's like what I see my role as right now. I'm a freaking lunatic. We've been doing this podcast for more than 21 weeks. We've taken some weeks off, but 21 episodes. We're going to continue doing them. We're going to do more video, more podcasts, hopefully in the future. We're going to get the word out on EOS. So whether our listeners want to help us get the word out or not, we're going to continue grinding here.
Absolutely.
I know Cypherglass is going to continue grinding. We're going to keep grinding at ICO Alert, and we're going to grow this blockchain space to fulfill this grandeur vision that we all have.
Absolutely. I think that's a great place to wrap it up. I love it. I love the sort of speech at the end, gets everybody hyped up. But
I'm hyped.
Yeah. If you were one of the few that were out there and you said, oh, they're doing a video version, let me go watch it on YouTube. Let us know. Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? Should we do other angles? Should we keep the same angle? What did you think? Just let us know in the comments, and we'll take that into account for next time.
Yes, please smash the like button. Smash the subscribe button. I finally get to say all that stuff now. I felt weird doing it when we were just audio.
Right.
Now we're on video, so smash it.
Yeah, they see the smash.
But we love the comments, guys. Really, like, we do this on our own time. Like, Rob's a blog producer, so you kind of want to get the community word out and support me doing this, and it's great. But we love your feedback. It's what drives me. Like I gotta every week I gotta research all the news. I gotta talk to all my contacts to see what's going on. After we record this, I gotta cut it up and produce it. So I put a lot of effort into this podcast and now this vlog for you guys, the community. So I hope you guys all enjoy it. Let us know that you're enjoying it in the comments. Follow us on Twitter. I'm Blockchain Zach with a K.
I'm Finchify, Finchify.
All right, so that's a good place to finish off. Once again, I'm Zach Gall.
And I'm Rob Finch.
And this is Everything EOS.